Hello everybody, this is the retake video for percent of. If you have not watched the original video on this skill, please go back and watch that one first to make sure you fully understand the skills before we move on. Really quick, I want to do a short review on the stuff we talked about at the beginning of the last video, which first of all is that if you have a percent, the percent can be changed into two other forms and still be equivalent. So the first form is usually going to be a decimal. Simply percent means per hundred. We covered that a lot in other videos. Percent means per hundred. So we would get percent of 45 would be 45 hundredths written as a decimal. 45 hundredths can then be converted to the fraction 45 100ths. And if you wanted to simplify this fraction, we could divide the numerator and denominator by 5 to get 9/20ths. Now, the big new skill here is that percent of is a lot like half of or 3/4 of. It usually means multiply. So for these problems that we're working on in this retake video, percent of a number means you are going to be multiplying those numbers together. The best way to do that is to either convert it into a decimal or you can convert it into a fraction. Most of my students will do decimals for most of the percent conversions, unless the numbers are very clean. In that case, a fraction would be fine, which we're going to now do this problem, 25% of 800. And I'm going to do it as a decimal and as a fraction to show you why sometimes a fraction can be faster. Either way, of means multiply in these types of problems. So let's do fraction first. 25% is the fraction 1/4, or 1 out of 4 wholes, which would be the same as 25 out of 100 wholes. I multiply then times 800, and I do it over 1 whole. And I multiply across the numerator and across the denominator. I could do long division here, or you can remember that 800 divided by 4 would be 8 divided by 4 with 100 added on. So we get the answer of 200. Now, if I wanted to do this as a decimal like I did in the other video, I could do 800 times 25 hundredths as a decimal with 2 digits behind the decimal point when we are done. From here, I multiply. And I get, it's going to be hidden a little bit here, but I put my decimal, whoops, not there. I put my decimal there. And I get 200 both ways. These are both correct. In this type of problem, if you notice, the fraction is probably faster when you have a nice clean whole number that you're working with. But if we look at the problem here on the right, 90% of 240, you could do this as a fraction, but this is the type of problem most of my students will then do as a decimal. 240 times 90 hundredths. I'm going to shortcut one step here and write it like that because we've done that a ton. We multiply like we've done many, many times now. And I get this, 2 digits behind the decimal point, 216. Now, I talked a little bit in the original video about checking your answer. The big key here is just to think about the answer you have and does it make sense? So 90% of something is almost all of it. Okay, it's not 100%, but it's really close. So it should be slightly less than what you started with, but it should be really close to that whole number. 216 is slightly less than 240. So I think this answer makes sense. And unless we did something arithmetically wrong with our multiplication, we probably have the right answer. Let's do one more real world problem here. Mr. Schmidt's quizzes have a minimum score of 80% to pass and move on. If his quiz has 32 questions on it, what is the minimum number of questions you need to get correct to pass? Now, what you could do is you could create a bunch of fractions here. I could just pick a number. I could maybe start with 24 out of 32. I could then do long division here, which as soon as I say the word long division, I probably hear a couple kids huffing and puffing through the computer screen because that is not everybody's favorite solution here, especially when you have numbers like 24 and 32. Long division would take a long time. However, at the end of that process, I would get a decimal or a percent, which would be 75. I could do that over and over and over until I get the right answer. But now that we know that percent of means multiply, I can just do 80% of my number of questions, which in this case is 32. So again, 32 times 80, 2 digits behind the decimal point, and I multiply, and I'm going to get a decimal here. So the question is, what's the minimum number of questions you need to get to pass? Well, if I got 25, I would be under the 80% because it's 25 and 60 hundredths. Therefore, you need at least 26 out of 32 correct. And that is the retake video of percent of. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know.